This is Amud Yomi Gemara and Shabbos Daf Pei Amud Aleph. We're holding on the last few words of Ayin Testament Beis, which the Gemara quotes the Mishnah that what is the quantity of diyoi, of ink, that one would have to carry in order to be chayiv. Said the Mishnah, diyoi kidei lichtoiv, in order to write, meaning 2 letters. Says the Gemara on the top of Pei Amud Aleph, Tana. We learned in a brayso, shtei oisiyos b'diyoi. One is chayiv for taking out 2 letters of dried ink. Shtei oisiyos b'kolmis, or 2 letters worth of ink in a quill. Shtei oisiyos b'kalomarin, or 2 letters in an inkwell. What if you took out 1 letter's worth of ink dried? Oisachas b'kolmis, and 1 letter's worth of ink in a quill. Oisachas b'kalmarim, and 1 letter's in an inkwell. Meaning, do they combine? Mahu says the Gemara Teku. You have to wait for Eliyahu Hanavi for that one. Amar Rava, 4 lines down. Hoitzi shtei oises, one took out 2 letters of ink. Ksavan kishum halech, but he didn't put it down in Rosh Hashanah, but rather he wrote the 2 letters in Rosh Hashanah while walking. And obviously, by writing, that means the ink stays there. As he's walking on the wall in Rosh Hashanah, he wrote 2 letters. Says Rava Chayiv. He's chayiv for carrying, as that's considered placing the ink down. As writing is considered the placement of the ink. Rav says further, one took out 1 letter of ink and wrote it. And by writing it, that's considered that placing down the ink. Potter. Why? Because that's 2 halves of the requisite quantity. Therefore, you're not chayiv. My time, what's the reason? Bidana da'avka lebasraisa. When he took out the last letter, chasa leilishir the kamaisa, he was already lacking the share of the first letter. What's the reason? So Rashi explains, because when ink dries, it shrivels up a little bit, thereby decreasing a bit of the quantity. And therefore, the 2 half measures, the 2 1 letter worth of ink, do not combine. Chiddush of Rava, a little bit perhaps of a chiddush in science. But Rava learns that's the halacha. Rava says further, if one took out a half of a gregoris of food and put it down, Rishaina, the first chatzi gregoris nasa kimisha kalta kelef. We view it as if a dog bit it, caught it, swallowed it, or it's as if it burnt up. Upater, again, the same yisoid that we don't view the 2 items as combining. Asks the Gemara, but it's there. It's sitting there on the ground. So why are we viewing it as if it's not there? Explains the Gemara, they called him Rishaina. But if he came and he picked up the first chatzi gregoris, before he put down the second one, then we view the first part as if it was caught or as if it was burnt up, upater. But if it's still there, then of course it will combine. So we're seeing over here that it's not a simple yisoid that we say that the 2 items don't combine, because that's not accurate. There are times that the items would combine. We're just saying that the items do not combine in a scenario when he removed it from that location. But if it's still there, then Ein Achanami would combine, which is din number 2. Din number 1 was, the reason it didn't combine is because Lamaisa, the Mitzias is that it shrivels up as it dries up, and therefore it's not the requisite shear. Valmai Rava, and Rava continues, about 14 lines down, the first one line is Oisha Nisrafa. Valmai Rava, Oitichai Grois Venicha. Once I got half a Grois and he placed it down, Vachazva Oitichai Grois. To get another half a Grois Venicha. Vehevir Derech Halel. And he passed it over the first Chatzi Grois. Chayiv, even though he didn't actually put it down. Vamai, Holoinach. Why is he chayiv? It didn't actually rest. Says the Gemara, he put it within 3 tzvachim. And we know the yisoid of lavud, that with anything within 3 tzvachim is as if it's closed the gap. Therefore, if you pass the second chatzi gregoris on top of the first chatzi gregoris, the 2 of them combine, and he will be chayiv. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Rava says within 3. The Rabbanan Tzrichanocha Gabi Mashu. They're within 3 tvachim of the ground. Said Rava back at the beginning of the Masechta. You have to place it on top of something on the ground, according to the Rabbanan. Says, why does Rava over here say that just merely passing it over will create a chiyuv? Says the Gemara, lo hi kasha. Says the Gemara, there's no kasha. Ki goyin be zoyrek. Here, when Rava says that you have to place it on a mashu, we're talking about if you throw an object from one area to next, when then we hold Zakt Rava has to rest for a moment. But kan be mavir, when you're passing it within 3 tvachim of the other item, that's where we say that as long as it's within 3 tvachim, it's considered as if it rested. Tana Rabbanan, it's back in the middle of the first line of Tana Rabbanan. Says the Gemara, another case in which the two items are considered that they combine to create a chiyuv. Hoitzi chatzik yorgis, want to get a chatzik yorgis, chatzik yorgis. Behelim echad, if it was in one act of forgetfulness, then chayiv. V'shtei alamais, if it's in 2 different acts of forgetting, potter, then he is potter. Only if it was one act of forgetting, and they both go into one rishos, that's where he's chayiv. Whereas if it's l'shtei rishuyos, then he will be potter. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rabba, V'hushish chiyav chatos beineihem. It's only when he went through a rishos that could create a chiyav chatos, avol karmelis. But if you went through a karmelis, which obviously is only a rishos d'Rabbanan, then loi will not create a chiyav. Whereas a bayamar a chiddush, afilu karmelis, avol pislo loi. But if there's a block of wood in between them, then not. Rav amar afilu pisla, even if it's separated by a block of wood, it's considered 2 separate rishuyos, and it'll create a chiyuv. The Rav L'Taimei explains the Gemara right before the 2 dots, about 15 lines at the bottom of the Amid. Why does Rava hold that a block of wood can separate 2 rishuyos and thereby create a chiyuv? Rava holds Shabbos Gitin Damya. Shabbos is like Gitin. Therefore, as long as there is something that separates between the two, it will create a chiyuv. And finally, we quote the Mishnah that says, Kechol kedei lichol ayin achas. Eye makeup, you have to take out enough to paint one eye. Says Gemara, ayin achas? Haloi kachli, no one in the world paints one eye. So why would painting one eye create a chiyuv? Ask the Gemara, the norm is obviously to put makeup on both eyes. The Tznuyos Bisman Chazal would wear a type of kerchief over their face, and only one eye would be revealed. So they only put on makeup on one eye. Meisvei asked the Gemara, Shemin Elazar Aimer, Kechol, if one takes out this eye makeup, how much you have to bring out? Im the Rafuah, Tiluchayin Hachas, Bim Lekashet, says Rav Shemin Elazar explicitly that if you're taking it out Lekashet for adornment, then B'shtein Ayim. Rav Huna just taught us Tznuyos put on makeup on one eye. That's village woman. There were different ways that they walked around. So the Iraniyos would have to take out enough makeup for both eyes. Says the Gemara, the next part is in parentheses, Shavak de'elitin al pinekav kata, Tanik de'elitin al pinekav kata el yayin, Tevek de'elitin b'resh shavshav, the head of a boar, Tana, Tita b'resh shavshav, Shabresh kana shal sayadim, which is the head of the reed trappers, will pick it up from Zephes. Actually, no, let's go drop further. Let's get to the end of the Amid. Zephes v'gafretz k'dilas, so he's pitching sulfur to make a hole. Tana, k'dilas nekem katan, a small hole, which is in a little vial to stop up the top of it. Char sis k'dilas piakor, top of the crucible of the gold refiners. Lemeimra, says the Gemara, there at the end of the Amid, the shear of Yehuda Nafish, doesn't mean that Rav Yehuda's shear is larger because he says enough to make this pot holder, this tripod, a kaimal on this shear, the Rabbanan Nafish. Tetzanan, we know the Rabbanan Shirmo is larger. It was learned in the Mishnah. Midas Minal Katan, a small child shoe, which is smaller than that of the Rabbanan. So why over here would it seem that the Rabbanan shear is smaller? Ema, says the Gemara, it means enough to plaster the cracks in a small tripod of the stove. It doesn't mean to actually create the item, and then indeed it will be smaller than the shear of the Chachamim. I'll pick it up from Amid Beis B'siyata Dishmaya.